Hi, my name is Mira, and this is the Pyrenees Special, full of never-before-seen footage, like these, in which I never told you that you can start your trip here, or you can start in here. In previous episodes of this series about my trip across the Pyrenees, I suggested places where you can start your thru-hike, visited the first highest peaks of this border ridge, showed you where to eat, sleep, or wash your tired feet, and recommended do's and don'ts to enjoy your mountain crossing without unnecessary expenses. And in this episode, I will show you everything I had to do to film the series you're watching right now. So welcome back to the Atlantic Ocean. As I was enjoying the last glimpses of the vast ocean, I knew that for the next few months I would have to become two people in one. One Mira would walk across the Pyrenees, and the other Mira would be his support team. And that meant only one thing to me. After each stage, I had to walk back to get my car. And you're probably wondering why I complicated my life with the car? After all, a regular hiker simply takes a backpack, sets off on a trail, and reaches its end, right? But I didn't want to be a regular hiker. I wanted not only to cross the Pyrenees, but also to film a series like no one had ever done before. And whether I succeeded, you can judge for yourself. As you can see, I really like making videos. I always try to make my videos look like they were shot by a whole film crew. But since I travel alone, all the footage is my work. And my equipment needs its own base camp. I charge my batteries in my car, I back up photos and videos in my car, and if something goes wrong, I can try to fix it in my car. Without my car, the series I wanted to shoot at the quality I was able to achieve would not have been possible. Thanks to my car, I was able to combine my two passions into one. All this meant that I spent many nights not only in a tent, but also in my car. My diligence did not allow me to skip any of the stages, so I spent a lot of time walking in the mountains as well as transporting my car. My car became my best friend, and I could always count on it. But don't worry, I met a lot of real-life friends along the way too. And thanks to all of that, I never felt alone. And I had a lot of fun filming it too. Check out some of the failed shots from the last few months. Yeah, it's not easy filming yourself alone. Thanks to having to move my car along the stages that I walked, I was able to visit places and events that I would otherwise have missed. And one of those events was the famous Tour de France. I had wanted to see at least one stage of this cycling race live since I was a child, And while I was crossing the Pyrenees, this wish came true. One day on the tour begins with festive and creative opening parade. For about 2 hours, the Tour de France and its partners put on a show, hand out many gifts, and strive to be the most creative to surprise the millions of fans waiting for the cyclist to pass by. Having never seen it before, I was surprised by the crazy creations appearing on the road, and how the spectators enjoyed the parade's arrival. But what I was most looking forward to was the peloton of cyclists approaching the mountains from Lourdes, where the 18th stage of the race was starting. And here they are. I had always only watched the Tour de France on TV, and today I saw it live. It was a truly unforgettable experience, so I decided that I had to ride my bike once more in the Pyrenees, and where else but on my route from the ocean to the sea. Just a short distance from where I watched the cycling race lies the town of Lourdes. This town is famous for the legend of Bernadette, to whom the Immaculate Conception, later known as Our Lady of Lourdes, appeared in a local cave. The lady told Bernadette to start digging in the ground at a specific spot and to drink from the spring that began to flow there. Shortly after, cures were reported from the water. Since then, Lourdes has been a place of pilgrimage for believers from all over the world. However, I cannot recommend a visit to this town because I have lost last vestiges of respect for religion as such in here. I'm sorry to tell you that Lourdes is one big market for religious trinkets. The merchants here can sell anything as long as the Our Lady of Lourdes is depicted on the packaging. I simply loathe a business built on gullible or downright desperate people, so I soon fled the city back to the mountains. And this peak was my next destination. The climb up to the 102-meter high radio television antenna is not difficult at all, especially if you come from the Tourmalet pass like I did. And if you reach the top on a clear and sunny day, you can see a large part of the French Pyrenees mountain range, including many of the highest points I have shown you in previous episodes of this series. But most importantly, don't forget to take enough water for the entire journey. At the top of the mountain, you can visit an astronomical observatory, a skywalk, a planetarium, a museum, or a restaurant. and you can even spend the night in a room that was used by technicians and astronomers in the past. Of course, you have to pay a lot for all this. But I climbed here not to spend money, but to enjoy the views and to remember the day I climbed here with my dad in 2005. Back then, we didn't have a proper map, so we had no idea how long the climb would take or where we were going. But we still made it to the top without a snack or a bottle of water. I remember this trip as one of those crazy ones that we endured rather than enjoyed. And maybe that's why I remember that day more than any other. My dad was so thirsty on the way back to the pass that he ran halfway to the car. He was looking forward to the beer that he had stored in the car. When we got back to our overnight spot that evening, he drank the whole can of beer in one go, even though it was warm as piss. I owe all these memories to my dad. So I took him on a trip with me so he could enjoy the beautiful views one last time, just like back then. I spent the night in the car on the Tourmalet pass, and in the morning, I met Peter and Gabby. They invited me for a morning coffee, and we had a nice chat. Peter and Gabby have traveled all over the world, so I could listen to stories about buying a car in Australia, experiences from a photo shoot in Africa, or about traveling through South America. It was a fun morning that I still remember fondly today. Shortly afterwards, I returned to the border with Spain to continue my journey across the Pyrenees. But more on that later. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to watch more. And if you want to see some pictures and read more stories, check out my socials. Thanks for watching and see you next time.